we have talked about Norwegian, French, Dutch, Russian, and Croatian volunteers that fought for the Germans during the Second World War. But there are also Brits, yes, British men who joined the Germans in the so-called British Free Corps. But this was a small unit. Why was it so small? And why did British men join in the first place? Well, that and more you'll find out in this new Formations episode, in which we'll talk about the British Free Corps. Stay tuned! Hey, good to have you back on the channel, and if you're new to this channel, my name is Stefan, I'm a history teacher and I'm hustling history for you. And if you liked it, then consider subscribing, and if you do so, do not forget to hit that notification bell so you will become part of the hustle. Let's start! When we think of fascism, Great Britain is mostly not the first country that comes to mind, since it was the first country, alongside France, that declared war on Germany in September 1939 and kept on fighting even after France had fallen. And it emerged as one of the victorious nations after the war. Yet there was a major fascist movement in Great Britain, and that was the British Union of Fascists, led by Edward Mosley. After the war had broken out, Mosley found himself arrested by the British authorities. More on this man and his party in a future video. Another important BUF member was William Joyce, a teacher of Irish descent who would later drop out and form the short-lived National Socialist League. Joyce and his wife would leave for Germany shortly before the outbreak of the Second World War and later took German citizenship. After Britain declared war on Germany, Joyce became a Nazi propaganda broadcaster and hosted the Radio English program Germany Calls. For this, he was nicknamed Lord Haw Haw. Now, I know a lot of you might type comments like that there are huge differences between fascism and National Socialism, and I'm aware of that. Do bear in mind that this channel has not really a theoretical scope, but if you want to go all out in the comments, go ahead. The initiative of the BFC, the British Free Corps, came from pro-German fascist John Emery, John Emery. He was the son of British Secretary of State in India. He had fought in the Spanish Civil War and was in France when the Germans overran the country in 1940. He found himself stuck in Vichy, France, which was a collaborating French client state where outgoing visas for British citizens of military age weren't granted. In other words, he was stuck in Vichy, of all places to be stuck in. And yeah, he found that pretty frustrating. And Emery was disappointed by how the Vichy government ran things. Then, in June 1941, the news reached him that Germany had invaded the USSR. And Emery, he was in shock, not necessarily because of the fact that Nazi Germany was invading the USSR, but moreover due to the fact that his home country, Great Britain, had now allied himself with or herself with the Bolshevist state, the Soviet Union. And from that point on, he believed that the government seated in London was not acting out the interests of the British Empire. He remained isolated in Vichy, France, till the summer of 1942, and then he was invited for talks to Berlin. Once there, he was asked what he was willing to do for Germany. And Emery, he wanted to be allowed to broadcast a British hour uncensored by the Germans, during which he would call for peace negotiations on the basis of Hitler's offer of July 1940, and that the Germans should consider founding a British anti-Bolshevik legion along similar lines to the French LVF. I did talk a great deal about this LVF, which consisted of French volunteers for the Germans. Link can be found in the description. The British anti-Bolshevik Legion would be named the British Legion of St. George. This name wasn't favorable because it wasn't too specifically English, and also it had these religious undertones. So therefore, they were thinking of changing it to British Legion, but it turned out that this wasn't possible because there already existed a British World War I veteran association with the same name. I mean, this is what I read. I have no idea, why would that be a problem in the first place, since Germany, invaded countries at will and violated practically all the conventions that existed. But if you have any ideas on this, leave a comment down below. Therefore, the new name was the BFC, the British Free Corps. The formation was a piece of German propaganda, and that explains why the soldiers had 3 distinctions on their uniforms: a collar patch with the 3 lines of England, a cuff title with Britische Freikorps, and an arm badge with the Union Jack flag. Uniform was standard field grey with a mountain cap with a death's head on front. It would seem that the special 3-line collar patch, cuff title and arm shield started to be issued in April 1944. Prior to that, the collar patch had been either the normal SS runes or a plain black one. With astonishing arrogance, the Britons objected to having to wear the Union Jack below the SS Eagle and, incredibly, obtained permission to wear it above. And the aims and principles of the BFC were as followed. The BFC consisted out of British subjects who had pledged to take up arms against what they perceived as the European war against Bolshevism. The BFC was against the British war with Germany and considered it the fault of international Jewry and therefore the betrayal of the British people and its empire. The BFC wanted peace between Great Britain and Germany and strived to a peaceful coexistence between the 2 empires. And the BFC would not pick up arms against British forces or support actions against its people. The idea was that recruits were to be drawn from British POW camps that consisted of British troops that were POW'd by the Germans in 1940. Problem was, not many came forward, only a handful, so it seemed that the experiment of the BFC was about to fail. It was now the winter of 1943. Part of the SS, its first commander was SS Hauptsturmführer Hans Werner Rupke, who had spent 1 year in the US before and was fluent in English. The meeting agreed that the BFC volunteers would not have to swear an oath to Hitler. They agreed, already sworn an oath to the British Crown, which they felt they could not break, and they would not have their blood group tattooed under their arms, which was a normal practice with SS members, nor, as foreign volunteers, would they be subject to the full range of German military law. They would receive normal pay of the German soldiers according to their rank. And thus, on the 1st of January 1944, the BFC, the British Free Corps, was established. A total number of 54 British would be part of the BFC, but these men, they came and they went. The maximum amount on one moment was 27. As historian Nigel Cawthorne wrote, 2 of these were John Leister, son of a German whose family had Nazi ties, and Eric Pleasance, a former member of the BUF. Both of them were pacifists who had been sent as agricultural workers to Jersey, one of the Channel Islands. Having failed to escape when the islands were occupied, they had joined the BFC in the hope of getting access to better food, alcohol, and women. When the unit would reach the magical number of 30, only then they would be sent to the front. But this didn't happen. In October 1944, they were sent to the Waffen-SS Pioneer School in Dresden. The previous commander, Rupke, he was ousted and replaced by Walter Kulich. Morale suffered as the training resumed. These men were not up for a fight and definitely not on the Eastern Front. Many went often drunk or absent without leave. I read that at some point 6 Maoris from New Zealand, they wanted to join the BFC, but they were rejected on racial grounds. The BFC witnessed the bombing of Dresden, and some of them took the opportunity to desert in the chaos. As a result of this, the entire BFC was arrested, and its commander, Kulich, he gave his men the option: either fight for the Germans or be sent to a concentration camp. They all chose to fight and were sent to the 3rd SS Panzer Corps to spend a month on the front line. A couple of men saw action when serving for the Nordland Division during the Battle of Berlin. Survivors were captured by the Soviets and handed over to the British. Others made their way west and fell in the hands of the Western Allies. One man, Erich Pleasants, he managed to escape Berlin together with his wife through the sewers. While doing this, according to his own testimonies, he had strangled 2 Soviet soldiers with his bare hands. They made it to Dresden and they went into hiding, but were discovered in 1946 by the communist authorities. He was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor in the USSR, but was released after Stalin's death in 1955. British fascist leader Edward Mosley was released in 1943, and after the war would try to make a comeback in politics, which failed. He would pass away in 1980. William Joy was convicted of high treason in 1945 and sentenced to death. Early 46 he was hanged. John Emery was also convicted of high treason and hanged, which took place in 1945. Other men were sentenced to prison, terms differing from 10 to 15 years, but most of them were released earlier. I read that the British Security Service, MI5, mid-1946 managed to track 3 more former BFC volunteers, but it seems like that it was too late by now to court-martial them. So basically they were summoned and they were told, never do it again, and then released. And if we're talking about British subjects that were drafted by the Germans, we should basically not forget the Indian soldiers, and they served in the Indian Legion. That army formation is also an interesting one, which I'll cover in the future. Do not forget to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks to my patrons, and a special thanks to Peter King, Tanya Dixie, Henry Clarkson, Rob Park, RL, and Colin Castleman. And a big thanks to James McAllister for providing me with research material. Now, if you want to know more about Norwegian volunteers, you can click right here. And if you want to know more about French volunteers for the Germans, you can click right here. Check me out on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.